take you through the closing plenary session with Dr. Salim Ul-Haq, Professor Masataka Watanabe, and Dr. Anders Granulan. We have had an overwhelming response to the Adaptation Forum 2010. Thank you. There are so many stakeholders represented here that we've heard a diversity of ideas, reflections, discussions, deliberations today. Thanks to all the speakers and participants for the valuable inputs. And now it's my pleasure and honor to invite Dr. Salim Ul-Haq. Salim is a Bangladeshi scientist based in London. He is a senior research fellow in the Climate Change Group at the International Institute of Environment and Development and the director of International Center for Climate Change and Development. Salim was awarded the Bertoni Award for his work in climate change adaptation in 2007. He is a lead author of the chapter on adaptation for the IPCC assessment report. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Salim, synthesizing today's learning and sharing his reflections. Salim.
Thank you very much, Rupa, and good afternoon to everybody. I've been asked to synthesize and reflect on the day's proceedings. And as you all know, after the plenary session, we broke into 3 parallel groups in the morning and then 3 in the afternoon. Not being able to attend all 6 of them, I've been very graciously helped by the moderators and rapporteurs from the sessions that I wasn't able to attend, and even the ones I was able to attend, who briefed me on what happened. So I have some summary points from them, which I will share with you. But before I do that, let me thank them all for their hard work and for their inputs to me, and apologize to them if I truncate the very extensive summary some of them gave me, because I won't be able to cover everything. So let me just say a few words about the plenary, because you were all here at that time, I presume, and were participant. But as a reflection, I think it was an extremely useful opening in that it represented a very high level of political commitment from the government of Thailand. The presence of the minister from Samoa showed the level of commitment from countries in the region. And I thought that Achim Steiner's presentation very much captured the reasons why adaptation has now become such a burning issue and an urgent issue for all of us to address, and the fact that so many of you have registered and attended this conference is an attestation to that. So let me briefly walk through the themes, and as I do so, you will see, as I summarize each one, that there are indeed issues of synthesis across them. A number of points come up in several of the themes, and then I'll share some personal reflections at the end. The first 3 themes in the morning were on vertical integration, horizontal integration, and financing adaptation. And then in the afternoon, the 3 themes were the role of science, vulnerability, and market mechanisms. So let me start with the first one on vertical integration. The feedback from the group was that there was a sense in which some people feel that adaptation is no more than sustainable development done well in the context of climate change. And that is indeed a reasonably good characterization of the practice of what one needs to do. But as we will see when we discuss the science of adaptation, there are some things that are new because of climate change and that do need to be taken into account. So while a lot can be built on the experience of development, there is some issues that do need to be brought in that are peculiar to climate change. And that a lot of things could be built on from the experience, and in particular the experience of dealing with disasters and disaster risk reduction, where a lot of knowledge has been gained, a lot of it is now being incorporated into mainstream development. So that's a very good first step to be starting with. And that there needs to be a balance between top-down efforts, particularly at the funding level and the scientific level, and bottom-up efforts, particularly with the more vulnerable communities, and the need to ensure that the voices of the poorest and most vulnerable, whether they be communities within countries or countries within the globe, need to be given if you like, a greater degree of respect and recognition. Moving on to the second theme, which was on horizontal integration, a number of issues came up. One of them being a disjunction between and the need for better communications between the generators of knowledge and the users of knowledge. And this, again, is a theme that got repeated in subsequent themes as well. And a disjuncture between the advocates and the actors. Again, we need to be clear about who's doing what. So a reflection on that is the need to ascertain and determine and accept that different actors have different roles, and that we all need to agree on what the roles of these different actors are, but that none of these actors can do it on their own. They all need to be communicating better with each other, and this forum is a very good example of a way to do that, but we need to come up with better ways than bringing 600 people together from all over the region for 2 days at a time, useful as that is. The other thing that came up was that the need to act now under uncertainty means that we cannot make the best the enemy of the good. We need to carry on with what information we have and not wait for the perfect science. Indeed, it's questionable whether the perfect science will ever emerge in terms of removing all uncertainty. And acting under uncertainty is not uncommon at all. Decision makers, policy makers, even householders act under uncertainty all the time. So one shouldn't be so afraid of this climate change uncertainty that much is made of. But nevertheless, improving our science, improving our knowledge is important, but we shouldn't be waiting for that in order to act. And one of the problems that arises in trying to get these different actors to work together is that the incentives to work together across disciplines and across different stakeholder groups are not there right now. And we need to think a little bit more about how can we incentivize this cross-fertilization and collaboration across groups. And one of the participants and moderators gave me a nice three-bullet, 3 Ps incentives, which were power, profit, and philanthropy. So let's see if we can put them into practice. And I think the issue with the private sector definitely would like the profit one. So we'll see if we can give them some profits in adaptation. Not easy to find, but they may be there. So let me move on to the third theme of the morning, which was financing adaptation. And I was the provocateur in that meeting, so I'll share some of my thoughts that the rapporteur has given as feedback. One was the need to distinguish and find ways of blending development assistance, the traditional overseas development assistance that rich countries have been providing to poor countries for decades now, with new climate change assistance, particularly climate change adaptation provision that comes under the Framework Convention on Climate Change. Money is money, it's all fungible. On the other hand, the reasons for giving it and the channels for giving it are very, very different, and one needs to understand them and find ways in which on the ground they find good synergies, but in the international arena they have different paradigms, different locations of negotiation and discussion, and people need to understand that. And there's a need for the people who work in development to have an understanding of the politics of climate change, if you like, and the people working in the climate change arena to have an appreciation of development. The other issue that came up was that one needs to be learning lessons in both directions, particularly in the direction of the lessons, as one of the speakers said, good lessons, bad lessons, and very bad lessons of development assistance over the last 6 decades, which we can learn from and should learn from as we go ahead with adaptation finance and development. But at the same time, the climate change arena is also providing some lessons, particularly in newly constructed and differently governed international funding systems, like the Adaptation Fund, for instance, which has a completely different paradigm of governance than anything else we have in the development assistance arena. And I would argue a much more democratic and legitimate governance than anything else we have in the development assistance arena. So again, there's a two-way learning street opportunity there between the development arena and the climate change arena, particularly on financing, both at the global level as well as at the national and local levels. Moving on to the afternoon sessions, the fourth session was on the role of science. And this issue of disjuncture and lack of communications, or the inability of scientists to communicate with decision makers, came up very strongly. The need for improving better communications, the need for improving incentives for the scientists to be to engage outside their narrow fields of disciplinary science, not just between the natural sciences and the social sciences, which is difficult enough, but between the scientists and the non-scientists, which is another big leap for them to be able to make. At the moment, there aren't those many incentives for them to do that. Can we find better ways and better incentives for improving that communication and catalyzing it between the scientists and the non-scientists? And again, this issue of how do we reduce uncertainty, the scientific community is doing a lot of work on that. But again, we should not hold up action until the uncertainty is removed, because then we'll be waiting forever for that. Moving on to the fifth theme, which was on vulnerability. The feedback from the group was very rich, and again, I apologize for not going through all of it, but the few things that struck my mind were this notion of constructing, if you like, vulnerability indices of between countries, of who is the most vulnerable, who is the least vulnerable, who's 110 on the list and who's 111 on the list, which a lot of people think about and try to come up with, is again a fool's errand. It's a dead end. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. It's almost impossible to do objectively, and it's very difficult to marry a top-down analysis that looks at the globe, looks at the impacts of climate change on the planet, and then looks at the physical and the ecosystems, which is relatively easy to do. But then when you start looking at from the bottom up and you take poverty and livelihoods and vulnerability into account, it becomes very messy and very difficult at a global scale. At a local scale, it is more amenable. So the answer, I think, is to be practical about what can be done, and not again try to find the perfect answer in terms of a league table of vulnerability. And in particular, this arises in the context of allocating resources for adaptation from a global financing pot. Again, we should be looking at the experience in the development arena, where allocating scarce resources to prioritized areas has some experience of, and it doesn't have to be vulnerability, obviously one of the criteria, but it doesn't have to be the only criterion on which allocations are made. The other notion that came up from this group was to reiterate the fact that the climate change issue is at one level a fundamentally an issue of justice, and that the issues of fairness, the issues of politics cannot be divorced from it. It's not a technocratic issue of just getting more knowledge, applying it, and just doing the right thing on the ground, important as that is. There's a very strong political equity and justice dimension to the issue that needs to be recognized, even if people are not themselves in the advocacy business around that issue. But they need to recognize that that comes with the territory. The climate change problem cannot be delinked from the politics and the justice and equity issues associated with it. And then the final session was on market mechanisms, where the feedback, one question that seemed to be addressed and seemed to have an answer was, will the private sector pay for adaptation? And the answer seemed to be probably not. But again, the challenge is we must still try to engage with them and see if there are perhaps some profit incentives, perhaps non-profit incentives for them to engage and find out what they might be. And the starting premise to talk to businesses and private sector, whether they be small or large, is that business as usual is no longer going to be an option for them. So, if they're smart, they need to start thinking about what climate change impacts are likely to be to their business operations, and then start thinking about what they might be able to do about it. So there may be hooks on which we could peg a further engagement with the private sector, which is worth examining. So that's a sort of very rapid run through the 6 themes and some of the outcomes from them. I'm presuming that there will be a more complete summary in the proceedings of the meeting that people can refer to. So if I've left anything out, apologies, and you can get it in the summary. Now, let me just turn now to a few personal reflections. The first one is to say that I've been working on this issue of adaptation now for over a decade. And I can tell you that within that decade, the explosion of interest in this issue in the last year, in the year up to Copenhagen, has been explosive. Before that, there were just a few of us, the usual suspects, as Dr. Park said this morning. We talked to each other. We met in the same forums. Now, when I go to a meeting like this, I don't know 90% of the people. When I used to go to adaptation meetings, I knew 90% of the people. Now I know only 10% of the people, and that's a good thing. The fact that so many people are coming on board.